Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Hibbinger here. I'm getting ready to read chapter 11 of Monster Street, The Boy Who Cried Werewolf. This chapter is called Sharpshooter. Max stared up at Gramps in shock and confusion, but the old man remained silent. Just then Max saw an old rifle leaning up against the side of the wall. Actually, the well. The wood was weathered, and the silver barrel was tarnished. "It was your father's rifle," Gramps said, observing Max's curiosity. "Though he spent most of his time with his books, he always found time to go hunting. Could shoot a flea off of a dog's back from 100 yards away. He had a gift. Do you know how to shoot?" Max shook his head. No. Gramps turned and picked up the rifle. He handled it like it was an extension of his own body. "You unlatch it here, you put the bullet in, relatch, and then cock it," Gramps explained while demonstrating each maneuver. He handed the rifle to Max, then picked up a coffee can from the ground near the barn and set it up on the fence. "Press the butt against your shoulder here and line up the sight and pull the trigger when you're ready." Max's hand shook. His heart pounded in his chest. "Slow and steady," Gramps said, watching Max's every move. Carefully, Max aimed at the tin can. He held his breath. He gulped, and he pulled the trigger. Pow! The can didn't move. Max blushed with embarrassment. "It's okay. It was only your first try," Gramps encouraged. "Tell you what, maybe we're too close." Gramps walked 100 yards down the field next to the barn and set the can on a fallen log. It was so far away it looked like nothing more than a tiny speck glinting in the sunlight. "Maybe my dad could shoot a can from 100 yards away, but not me," thought Max. When Gramps arrived back at Max's side, the old man said, "Now, there ain't a scope on this old thing, so you'll have to really focus." Determined to prove himself, Max lined up the sight at the end of the rifle, just like Gramps had demonstrated. He could barely see the can. "Just let your eyes do the work," Gramps whispered. In that moment, Max relaxed his eyes and his vision sharpened. He saw the can line up with the sight. He pulled the trigger. Pow! The can popped off the log and rattled into the grass. Max could hardly believe it. Gramps said, somewhat surprised. "Lucky shot, boy. You might be a natural just like your father. You never know when you might need to protect yourself out here." Max smiled, feeling proud. It was the first time anyone had ever told him that he was like his father. Just then the meal bell rang from the front porch of the cabin. Max turned to see Grammy standing there in a red and white checkered apron and her hands on her waist. "Max, would you mind gathering some eggs from the coop for me? Breakfast is almost ready," she called over to them. "Sure, Grammy," he shouted back. "You go ahead. I'll refill the water pail." "Never keep a lady waiting," Gramps said. "And we'll talk more about your father later." Max left Gramps and headed to the red barn. It was a ramshackle structure that looked like it might collapse at any moment. There were holes in the walls. Its red paint was faded from the sun exposure, and the wood plank siding was rotted. Max pushed open the barn doors, and a whiff of manure stung his nostrils. As he approached the chicken coop in the back of the barn, a feather floated right in front of him, landing on the tip of his nose. He then saw a carnival of feathers dancing all around him. Strangely, there was no clucking, and when he looked closer, there were no chickens, only feathers and blood.